Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. SkyCommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by SkyCommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Picture this. You're watching this amazing aerial display, maybe 5 drones moving together, painting light across the sky, super cool. Or maybe think about inspecting a really long pipeline, say 15 kilometers, where you definitely can't see the drone the whole time.
Right. Those are perfect examples of where the standard rule book, it just doesn't quite cover it.
Exactly. And that's where these Special Flight Operations Certificates, SFOCs, come in.
Precisely. Think of an SFOC as a specific agreement you make with Transport Canada. It acknowledges, look, this operation's a bit different. It goes beyond the standard Canadian aviation regulations, the CARs.
So it's like getting a special hall pass because the normal rules don't fit.
Kind of, yeah. But it's more serious than a hall pass because these operations often have a different kind of risk involved. The SFOC is really a detailed safety contract. It's tailored specifically to what you plan to do.
Okay, makes sense. More than just permission.
Definitely. It's a whole framework to ensure things are done safely when you're in those complex situations.
And that is exactly what we're diving into today. You, our listener, sent over some great materials, articles on advanced ops, SFOC explainers, pilot guides, rule summaries, overviews, even some mock exam questions, which are really useful.
Yeah, good mix.
So our mission here is to unpack all of that and really figure out what you need to know. Like, when is an SFOC actually required? What does getting one involve? We want to cut through the jargon and give you those aha moments.
Our goal is to give you a solid handle on the triggers, the signs that say, yep, need an SFOC here. And also, what goes into a strong application and the kind of safety thinking behind it all.
Whether you're studying for a certification or just want to understand advanced drone stuff better.
Exactly. Practical, usable knowledge.
Okay, let's jump right in then. When is an SFOC basically non-negotiable?
The sources point to a few clear triggers. The first one seems to be operating multiple drones at once, like that light show example.
Right, swarm operations. What's key here is basic airspace management. The standard rules, they're built for one pilot, one aircraft. Simple enough.
But when you have multiple drones controlled by one pilot or maybe a team, suddenly things get way more complicated. Collision avoidance, keeping them separated. What happens if something goes wrong? It multiplies the complexity.
Okay.
So Transport Canada needs an SOC. They want to see exactly how you're going to manage those extra risks, a detailed plan.
Got it. And looking at those practice questions you shared, you see things like 5 RPAS controlled by one ground station or simultaneous launch. Those are dead giveaways, aren't they?
Absolutely. Clear signs. SFOC required for swarm ops. Okay, what about flying near people? That's another big one.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
Precisely. Now, the CARs do let you fly near people, but only under very specific safety conditions.
Like what?
Well, either the drone itself needs to be certified safe for flying near people, or you need to keep a good distance, that 3-to-1 horizontal offset. Basically, stay 3 times as far away horizontally as you are high up. Creates a safety buffer if it falls.
At the 3.1 ratio.
Right. Or you need some kind of physical shield, like a barrier protecting the people. If you plan to fly directly over people without any of those things, you need an SFOC to show how you'll keep it safe.
Because the risk of injury, if something fails, is just too high otherwise.
Exactly. The thinking is all about preventing harm if the drone malfunctions.
So those examples like flying over a seated audience or crossing over a construction site with workers below, if you don't have those specific measures, boom, SFOC needed.
You got it. Proactive risk management for people on the ground. Okay, another situation. Flying when it's dark. Night operations.
Right, what are the rules there?
The baseline requirement for night flying is pretty clear. Your drone needs working anti-collision lights, steady or flashing, visible from at least 3 nautical miles, and they have to be on the whole time before takeoff to after landing.
3 nautical miles, okay.
Yeah. If you can't meet that, maybe your drone isn't equipped, or the operation needs stealth or something, then you need an SFOC. And that SFOC has to spell out your alternative safety measures. How will you make sure you're seen or avoid collisions without those standard lights?
So the examples like flying at dusk with no lights, or maybe a client wants a stealth approach at night, those immediately tell you, okay, this isn't standard, probably need that SFOC with a really good safety argument.
Exactly. Now, it's not just about where and when you fly, but also what the drone is carrying. Payloads are a big factor.
Right, how so?
Well, Transport Canada flags certain payloads as potentially adding significant risk. Things like spraying liquids or powders from the air, dropping anything, whether it's for delivery or mapping or whatever, broadcasting real-time video that might interfere with other signals, or carrying sensors that could cause RF interference.
Makes sense. Potential for problems there.
And also, a big one. Any drone setup that weighs over 25 kilograms in total, that generally bumps you into a higher risk category too. They see these things as hazard multipliers.
Hazard multipliers, I like that. So if you see keywords like spray, drop, transmit, carry, or over 25 kilograms in an exam question or a plan.
Red flag.
Yeah.
Think SFOC. Transport Canada will want a very detailed safety plan for how you're managing those specific added risks. Might even need extra insurance or detailed tech docs for the payload.
Okay, and then there's the big one. Beyond visual line of sight, BVLOS.
Ah, yes, BVLOS. That comes up again and again in all the materials. It's a consistent trigger for an SFOC. If the pilot or even a visual observer helping out can't keep continuous, unaided visual contact with the drone the entire flight.
You need an SFOC, period.
Pretty much. The core problem is situational awareness, right? How do you see and avoid unexpected things if you can't actually see your aircraft?
That's a really clear point. And one of the mock exam questions kind of tested that, didn't it? Even with observers along the route or a signal relay, if the pilot can't see the drone directly, still BVLS, still needs the SFOC.
Exactly. Those things might be part of your SFOC's safety plan, but they don't remove the fundamental BVLOS classification. Okay, what about the airspace itself? Are there zones where you automatically need one?
Good question.
Yes, flying in restricted airspace. Specifically, Class F airspace that's marked as advisory or restricted, usually see it as a CYR and then a number. Flying in there almost always requires an SFOC.
Why is that?
Because those areas often have specific hazards, maybe military activity or other sensitive stuff going on. So they need much tighter control and coordination for any flights, drones included, for safety and security.
Okay. And this is maybe a good place to clarify something else from the resources. Getting NAV drone approval for controlled airspace doesn't mean you don't need an SFOC, right?
Excellent point. No, they're separate things. NAV drone is primarily about deconflicting your flight path with manned aircraft in that controlled airspace. It's about traffic management.
So making sure you don't bump into planes.
Basically, yes. NAV drone doesn't assess if your operation itself needs an SFOC because you're flying BVLS or over people or carrying something risky. They just clear the airspace for you.
So NAV drone is like getting clearance for the runway. But the SFOC is your specific permission for how you're flying and managing the risks of your particular flight.
That's a great way to put it. An AV drone handles the where regarding traffic. SFOC handles the how regarding your specific operations, risks, and mitigations.
Got it.
And just to loop back quickly, that 25 kilogram weight limit, it mentioned payloads, but operating any RPAS over 25 kilogram total weight is another really common trigger for needing an SFOC, even if the operation seems simple otherwise.
Because of the potential impact energy if something goes wrong.
Precisely. Increased kinetic energy means increased risk.
Okay. And the last trigger mentioned was emergency operations. Even in a crisis, you can't just fly.
Not quite carte blanche, no. There are provisions for getting rapid authorization or sometimes just needing to notify Transport Canada ASAP after an emergency flight, think search and rescue, immediate disaster response.
Right.
But the principle holds. If the operation deviates from standard rules, it needs that oversight and specific permission, even if it's fast-tracked. Accountability and safety are still paramount, even when things are urgent. Okay,
so we pretty much nailed down the when. Let's shift to the how. According to the sources, what makes for a really strong SFOC application? What are they looking for?
What really comes through is that a good application isn't just paperwork. It's showing you have a really proactive, thought-through safety plan.
So what does that look like?
It means clearly showing redundancy, backup systems if the main ones fail. It means having well-defined emergency procedures, practiced ones for different scenarios, clear roles for everyone on the team who does what. robust fail-safes, things that kick in automatically, and crucially, a really thorough strategy for spotting and dealing with all the potential hazards for your specific flight.
I remember one of those mock questions really hit this home. It asked what the strongest element of an SFOC request was, and the answer was something like redundant GPS with a reliable return to home.
Exactly. That highlights the importance of those built-in safety nets as layers of protection.
So beyond those core safety principles, what information actually needs to go into the application package itself?
Typically, you need to start with the what and why. Clearly state the purpose and the scope of your flight. What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Then, the big one, a detailed risk assessment. Identify all the potential hazards, figure out how likely they are and how bad they could be, and then explain exactly what you'll do to mitigate them, reduce that risk.
Makes sense. Hazard identification and mitigation.
You also need the drone's specs, make, model, serial number, details about the flight area, coordinates, altitudes, any environmental factors, and really important, contingency plans. What's plan B, C, D if things go wrong, loss of signal, bad weather pops up, equipment failure.
Okay, sounds comprehensive. And practically speaking, how do you submit this? Where does it go and how long does it take?
Usually you submit it electronically, email, or maybe an online portal to the Transport Canada regional office for the area where you want to fly.
Regional office, got it.
And the consistent advice from all the sources is allow plenty of time. At least 30 working days is the standard recommendation for them to review it properly.
30 working days, so plan ahead.
Definitely. Now, emergency SFOCs, as we said, get handled faster, but for planned stuff, submitting well in advance is key to avoid delays.
One of the resources had a neat little acronym to remember the application bits, FLIGHT. Can you break that down?
Sure, yeah, FLIGHT it stands for. F is for flight objective, what's the goal? L is location, where exactly are you flying? I is incident plan, what do you do in an emergency? G is gear and crew details on the drone, equipment, and your team's qualifications and roles. H is hazard mitigation, how you're managing the risks. And T is time frame and conditions, when are you flying, and under what limits, like weather.
FLIGHT, that's actually really helpful. A good mental checklist.
It is, helps make sure you cover the bases.
Now, it's clear just filling boxes isn't enough. Transport Canada wants solid safety reasoning. What does that really mean in practice?
It means going way beyond just ticking regulatory boxes. It's about showing you deeply understand the risks of your specific unique operation and that you have a layered approach to safety.
Layered approach.
Yeah, like anticipating failure modes, thinking through what could realistically go wrong, then building in redundancy, backup systems, backup procedures, so if one thing fails, another layer catches it. Keeping people and other aircraft separate is always fundamental. And for complex stuff like BVLOS or swarms, showing your safety procedures can actually scale up effectively. It's really about proving a safety-first mindset permeates everything.
It sounds like you almost need to think like an aircraft engineer, considering all the what-ifs and having solid answers.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. Airworthiness level thinking applied to operations.
And that ties into a key phrase that kept popping up in the materials. If you can't comply, you've got to apply. Seems pretty fundamental.
Absolutely. If what you want to do doesn't fit neatly into the standard cars, don't try to bend the rules or assume you're an exception. The right way, the legal way, is to recognize you need an SFOC and go through that formal application process with Transport Canada.
Prioritize safety, operate within the framework.
Exactly, especially for these more complex, higher-risk flights.
Okay, now let's tackle some common mistakes or myths. The Thors has highlighted a few misconceptions about SFOCs. What should our listener be aware of?
Okay, first big one. SFOCs are not just for commercial operators. Recreational flyers, researchers, schools, emergency services, anyone whose operation falls outside standard rules might need one.
Good clarification. It's about the operation, not the operator type.
Right. Another one, having an advanced RPAS certificate does not mean you never need an SFOC.
Ah, I could see people thinking that.
Yeah. The advanced certificate gives you more freedom under the standard rules, but it doesn't magically authorize BVLOS or swarms or flying in restricted airspace without an SFOC. The certificate shows pilot skill. The SFOC addresses the specific operational risks.
So they're complementary, not replacements.
Precisely. And maybe the most crucial point, an SFOC isn't just a suggestion. It's a legally binding document.
The sources really hammered this home.
Failing to follow the conditions laid out in your SFOC, that's a violation of the Aeronautics Act. Big penalties, fines, losing your certificate, serious stuff.
And you have to stick exactly to what the SFOC allows, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's only valid within its defined scope. Fly outside the approved area, or outside the approved time. Use different gear or pilots than lifted. You're no longer covered by the SFOC. You're breaking the rules.
Like that example, SFOC says daylight only, but you fly at dusk.
Yep. Instantly non-compliant. And potentially unsafe.
What about those emergency SFOCs again? Can you really just fly first and tell them later if it's a huge crisis?
Not quite. There are expedited processes for genuine emergencies, life or death situations, immediate disaster response. But you're still expected to either apply for emergency SFOC super fast, or, if action is truly immediate, notify Transport Canada as soon as you possibly can afterwards.
So the idea you can just completely skip contacting them is wrong.
Very wrong and dangerous to assume. There's always a process, even if it's accelerated.
It seems like Transport Canada keeps a close eye. The sources also mentioned they might ask for more info after you submit the application.
Oh yeah, that's pretty common. During the review, they might need clarification. They could ask for your standard operating procedures, your SOPs, maintenance logs for the drone, flight records, proof of your crew's training and experience.
So you need to have your ducks in a row before you apply.
Definitely. Submitting a half-baked application without that supporting documentation ready, that's just asking for delays or even rejection.
Okay, another clarification point. Having multiple SFOCs doesn't mean they stack up or give you a master key to all airspace, does it?
No, not at all. Each SFOC is for a specific operation with its own limits. Having one for spring doesn't help you with the BVLOS inspection unless that's also covered. And an SFOC itself doesn't automatically grant access to restricted airspace like, say, a military zone. That usually needs separate coordination on top of the SFOC.
Good distinction. And even with a valid SFOC, you can still lose your pilot certificate if you mess up.
Absolutely. The SFOC is conditional on you flying safely and following the rules and the SFOC's terms. Fly recklessly, break the SFOC conditions intentionally, lie to Transport Canada. They can, and likely will, suspend or revoke your pilot certificate on top of any SFOC-specific penalties.
So the SFOC isn't a shield against basic pilot responsibility.
Not in the slightest. It's an added layer of responsibility, really.
The sources also mentioned something about a standing SFOC versus a blanket SFOC. What's the difference?
Right. A standing SFOC is usually for longer periods, 6 months, a year, maybe more, often for routine stuff like inspecting the same power line route regularly or surveying the same area.
Okay, sounds convenient.
It can be, but it's not a blanket permission slip. Standing SFOCs still have specific limits, defined areas, types of operations, procedures you must follow each time. Often you still need to notify TC before each flight or be ready for audits.
So still specific, just longer term.
Exactly, not a free-for-all.
And a practical point.
Yeah.
You need to have your SFOC with you during flights, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Best practice and pretty much expected. You need to be able to show it paper or digital if an inspector asks. Not having it handy could ground you.
Which leads to the next point.
Yeah.
You can be inspected anytime.
Yep. Having an SFOC doesn't mean less oversight. Transport Canada inspectors can audit or inspect your operation whenever. They can check your logs, watch your crew, look at your gear, and if they see safety issues or rule breaking, they can ground you immediately.
So, always be ready for inspection.
That's the mindset. Inspection readiness is part of operating under an SFOC.
Okay, before we get into scenarios, let's quickly touch on the legal bedrock here. Where do SFOCs come from in the regulations?
The main one is Canadian Aviation Regulation 903.01. That's the part that gives the Minister of Transport the power to issue SFOCs when they're satisfied the flight can be done safely.
CR 903.01.
Right. And that's all under the umbrella of the Main Aeronautics Act, which governs all aviation in Canada and sets out enforcement and penalties.
And what specific cars often lead to needing an SFOC?
Well, CAR 901.11 on controlled airspace, especially near restricted zones or during TFRs. CAR 901.40, that's the big one prohibiting BVLOS without an SFOC. CAR 901.38, about flying near or over people if you can't meet the standard safety distances or shielding. You need one.
Okay.
Sometimes CAR 901.69, related to the drone's design standards. An SFOC might allow operations with waivers if you can prove equivalent safety. And never forget, CAR 902.01, the general rule against reckless or negligent flying. That applies always, SFOC or not.
That makes sense. Those rules define the boundaries, and the SFOC is needed when you have to operate outside them safely.
Precisely.
Okay, let's make this really concrete. The resources had some great scenarios, like mini case studies. Let's walk through a couple. First one. Inspecting a 10-kilometer power line, pilot can't see the drone for big chunks of it. SFOC needed.
Yes, absolutely. That's classic BVLOS. As soon as the pilot loses continuous unaided visual contact, it's BVLOS under CAR 901.40 SFOC mandatory.
Even if they plan to use visual observers along the way?
Yep. Observers might be part of the mitigation plan in the SFOC application, but the operation itself is still classified as BVLOS. So SFOC required.
Okay, crystal clear. Scenario 2, filming a concert in a park. Using a tiny drone under 250 grams, but planning to fly directly over the crowd for cool shots. SFOC needed.
Yes, it is. Even though the drone is small, flying directly over unprotected people, especially a crowd, is high risk according to the rules.
Because of CAR 901.38.
Exactly, and just general safety under 902.01. Unless you can maintain that big 3.1 lateral distance or have physical shielding, which is unlikely over a crowd, you need an SFOC to justify flying over them safely.
Okay, even for the little guys. Got it. Here's a trickier one. You have a standing SFOC for BVLOS spraying in Alberta. A client in Saskatchewan wants the same service. Can you just pop over the border and use your Alberta SFOC?
Nope, you almost certainly can't. Standing SFOCs usually have geographic limits written right into them. If it says Alberta only, flying in Saskatchewan is outside its scope, that's a violation.
So what's the solution?
You'd need to either apply to amend your existing SFOC to add Saskatchewan, or get a whole new SFOC specifically for the Saskatchewan operation.
Right. SFOCs are location-specific unless stated otherwise.
Okay, emergency time. Wildfire breaks out. You're asked for immediate aerial imaging, probably BVLOS, maybe in restricted airspace. The emergency boss says, "Go now! We'll sort the paperwork later." Legal to fly.
That's a tough spot. While there are emergency provisions, CR 903.02, the emergency coordinator on the ground can't just waive Transport Canada regulations.
So what should the pilot do?
The pilot needs to make every reasonable effort to contact Transport Canada for emergency authorization first. If that's truly impossible and immediate flight is needed to save lives or property, they fly, but then notify TC as soon as humanly possible afterward to report it and get retroactive approval. Just flying on the coordinator's say-so without engaging TC at all? Very risky, legally. Okay, always try to follow the process even when rushed. Makes sense. Nighttime scenario. You have an SFOC for night inspections. But tonight, your drone's anti-collision light is way too dim, maybe a battery issue. Client's pushing you to fly anyway, what do?
Safety first. You absolutely delay the flight. You either fix the light so it meets the requirements, CRR 901.39, or your SFOC needs to specifically address operating with non-compliant lighting and detail-approved alternative safety measures.
So you can't just ignore the dim light because you have a general night SFOC.
Definitely not. Flying with known faulty safety equipment, that's violating regulations and likely unsafe under 902.01, regardless of the SFOC.
Okay, last one. You have an SFOC for a swarm show, approved for, say, 5 drones and 3 pilots minimum. 1 pilot calls in sick. Can you fly the 5 drones with only 2 pilots?
No, not unless your SFOC explicitly allows for that reduced crew under specific conditions, which is unlikely without prior approval.
Right.
Because the SFOC approval was based on the safety plan submitted, which included that specific crew number managing the risks. Operating with fewer people than approved breaches the SFOC terms, CIR 903.01, and compromises the safety case. You need to postpone or get the SFOC amended with a revised safety plan for the smaller crew.
Wow, okay. Those scenarios really show how the rules and the SFOC conditions interact. This has been super helpful.
Glad to hear it.
So for you listening, the big takeaways seem clear. SFOCs, absolutely vital when you're operating outside the standard rules. Planning and safety reasoning aren't optional. They're central to getting approval.
Right. And having that advanced certificate is great, but it doesn't replace the need for an SFOC in these specific high-risk or non-standard situations.
And underlying it all, safety first. That phrase sums it up. If you can't comply, you've got to apply.
Couldn't say it better myself.
Yeah.
The next time you're planning a flight that feels like it's pushing the envelope, remember the SFOC isn't just bureaucracy. It's proof of your commitment to doing it right, managing the risks, and keeping the skies safe for everyone.
A testament to thorough planning.
Exactly. Makes you wonder, what other kinds of operations out there might need this level of specific approval? Maybe thinking about different classes of airspace and the nuances there. That could be interesting for a future dive.
That's a great thought. Definitely something to explore next time. Thanks so much for breaking all this down.
My pleasure. That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.